another significant moment, which was probably a defining moment, I think, in my ministry here, was September 11th, 2001. You know, the towers were hit and collapsed in the morning, and within very little time, I recognized that we needed to have some kind of worshipful event that evening, and we began letting people know. Jerry, you and Karen came into my office that day, and we talked about what was going on and how we might begin to try to make sense of it, although on that particular day it was awfully early to make any sense out of anything. But I will not forget that night when we put together a worship service that had a great deal of song and some readings, and I prepared a short message. And the place filled up, and what I remember from that night was the power that was generated in this room by people coming to their religious home in order to gain a sense of finding themselves on that day when so much was lost.
Many people from the community also who were looking for something. So
that happened on the following Sunday more, and I'll talk about that in a moment too. But on the night of September 11th, it was mostly our community, mostly our congregation that came. There were people from the community, but it was primarily members of our congregation who were here, and people that I know were in the neighborhood of the World Trade Center. People I know who made it back across the Hudson River by helter-skelter. People who got to this side of the river and were hosed off by fire hoses, and people who had been through hell that day personally in the midst of that experience, and then the rest of us who had been through hell that day because here we were on that day. And the thing that was a miracle to me that day was watching the people come in for that 7 o'clock in the evening service, just rounded shoulders and sagging heads and sagging bodies and just struggling to be. And when we left, we went out and we sang our final song out on the front lawn. And as people walked out to do that, shoulders were back and squared a bit more, and heads were being held just a little bit higher, and it just felt like the community had come together in a way that it allowed itself to serve itself. People came, and in serving the others who were here, were served, and it was phenomenal.
Yeah, so that seemed to have had an effect for a long time in the congregation.
It did.
Do you want to talk a little?
Well, you know, just then that following Sunday, you know, our normal attendance on Sundays has ranged off and on through the years, but in those days, not too different from now, but in those days, you know, we would have maybe 150 or so people on a Sunday morning at the second service, and maybe around 80 or so people at the first service, 80 to 100 people at the first service. On that following Sunday, between the two services, there were 1,500 people who were here for the worship service. Not just did our congregation need to find a place where they could draw strength, but the people from the broader community who did not have religious congregations to turn to came here, and they were here with us, and you know, it was enormous on that next Sunday. Again, we were set up in Fletcher Hall again, and that was the case for the next 2, 3, 4 Sundays after that, as this became kind of a central place for people to come to find comfort and strength in a time of distress.